Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy.
What do you got for us today?
Today, we're headed to a place that is nicknamed the Dinosaur Highway by paleontologists. You need another?
Yeah.
Well, they apparently found a real big footprint from a dinosaur that they named Megalosaurus there. And if that doesn't help you, it's also the home of Alice in Wonderland.
England?
Yes.
Oh, yay. It's known as the Dinosaur Highway?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Interesting.
I wouldn't have guessed it.
Yeah.
I would think more deserty.
I was thinking more Middle East.
But I don't talk to paleontologists, so I don't know what their lingo is, but apparently they've got one.
All right. I guess every trade has their own language.
So I'm going to start off by introducing you to Anne Greene, who was born around 1628 in Steeple Barton, Oxfordshire, England.
Wow.
I know, way back. So hold on to your britches, because this thing is crazy.
He's just trying to compete, because I did an 1883 feller.
Well, if we were competing, you lost badly.
Sure did.
So she wasn't born to a life of privilege. By the time she's a young adult, she's working as a scullery maid, which, in case you didn't know,
It's in the kitchen.
sorta. It's really the bitch of the house. She's doing all the washing of the dishes, the pots, the pans, vegetable prep work, scrubbing floors, doing laundry. Pretty much the lowest level of maid you can be, but it's like the entry-level position, but also where the youngins are going to do all like anything labor intensive.
Got it. On a side note, you know, like the person that was meant to wipe the king's ass or whatever, it was supposed to be like the
Yeah.
highest.
I'll stick to the floors.
I would rather be the scullery maid than have that high-ranking title of the official ass wiper. Yeah.
Well, you figure unless he's got a bad case of IBS, your job, maybe if he's real dehydrated, you're not working all that often.
I feel like with the garbage they got to eat, though, and the way they went about preparing food, there was lots of bouts of food poisoning going on.
That's because nobody washed anything. They didn't know what a germ was, let alone soap.
So I'm going to say that was a very dirty job.
And they didn't have toilet paper, so he's probably using his own hand.
Ugh.
Like just plucking off those dingleberries.
I feel like vomiting, but okay.
Anyway, so we got way sidetracked because she's not an ass wiper of any sorts. She's doing the women's work all around the house. But a neat little fun fact about scullery maids. The scullery was actually a small room off the back of the house or off the kitchen where you would do the dishes and washing and any other dirty housework. But I thought that was interesting. So the scullery maid, that was like her office. But by 1650, Anne would be working for Sir Thomas Reed, who was a justice of the peace and also the former sheriff of the county. Now, she lived under the stairs and was pretty much at the beck and call of the family.
She was the Harry Potter.
She was. So, I don't know if you'd rather be an ass wiper or really... I know you gotta cut this out, but be kind of like you are now. You're at the beck and call and don't get a whole lot of sleep because it's whenever anybody needs anything. So
why would I cut that out?
It's just like
it's called the facts of life.
Yeah, you're doing all the things for everybody and running on all the slack slapes.
Spoiler for the listeners out there, if you weren't aware of it, if you get married and have children and you do any sort of housekeeping and actual taking care of your children, you don't get a lot of sleep.
Or breaks.
You're supposed to be on call 24/7.
But I'm going to assume with our detours thus far and your ability to do the math in that you don't remember how old she is at this point, so I'll do it for you. She's 22 when she's working for Sir Thomas.
She's an old lady now.
Pretty much. But I'm going to assume she's also a looker because she's going to catch the eye of Sir Thomas's grandson. Geoffrey Reed, who was about 16, 17 years old when they would...
She's an older lady.
I would say...
She's a cougar.
Yeah, well, Anne would claim that she was seduced by Geoffrey. And before long, Anne and Geoffrey would be playing hide the sausage, and Anne would become pregnant.
That's quite a pickle.
And in case you didn't know, in 1650, being pregnant and unmarried isn't a good thing. And neither was the whole sex before marriage anyhow. But Anne would claim she didn't know she was pregnant until she went to the privy and a fetus fell out.
Ugh.
But people didn't really believe that because she was caught while trying to hide said fetus. So they thought that, like, no, that doesn't make sense. We think you done killed it.
Oh,
But
it was dead?
I kind of believe her because, back in those times, like even in the 18-somethings, you had females who didn't know where babies came from or the wedding night or any of those things. So I feel like 1650, it's not that hard to imagine that she didn't know she was pregnant.
That and the girdles.
But can you imagine the fear and panic of what to do if you think you're having real bad cramps and head to the bathroom and then a fetus is in there?
Was that from me?
I could see the panic and then you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And who on earth would you go to for questions? Because, mind you, there's no Googling it, and you figure in that point in time, even being associated with somebody who was having sex before marriage, let alone trying to conceal a pregnancy, you'd be thrown out alongside them. So who could she go for? She's the fucking maid, so
yeah,
I kind of have sympathy for her.
Same. That's a terrible situation. Except she
Yeah.
was the adult.
But she was trying to hide the baby's body as a way to cover her shame for being loose with her morals and to avoid...
Wait, hide the baby's body?
And to avoid losing her job.
Hide its body? It was dead? Was it born?
Well, I'm getting there. So it was estimated that Anne was just 17 weeks into her pregnancy.
Oh.
So
that's early. It's a miscarriage.
Pretty much. I would say stillborn.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's like...
Well, I don't even think that'd be considered stillborn. Well, I don't know. I don't know at what point it goes from being a miscarriage to a stillborn.
So I think a stillborn is when it could be alive outside, but it's born dead. And a miscarriage is when it can't survive out on its own. And I think that's like 22 weeks now with today's technology. So 17 weeks. And it fell out in the toilet.
I can't imagine it was very clean. Even if it would have came out breathing, its first breath would have been a turd. But Sir Thomas, now mind you, he was a former sheriff, so he's not, when he catches wind of this, he's gonna be absolutely hot that this happened under his household, so he doesn't want to hear anything of she was seduced and the innocent victim in all this. It couldn't have been his kin that got her into this situation, so everybody will pretend like they don't hear that it took two to tango kind of thing, and that there's a him that should be held accountable as well, because the hymns never get in trouble.
Well, to be fair, she is 22 and he was 16.
So it all falls onto Anne, and Sir Thomas is going to yap about how Anne needs to be prosecuted because under the Concealment of Birth of Bastards Act in 1624, it basically says if a woman conceals the death of her illegitimate child, the law is to conclude that she murdered the child.
What?
I know, it's one of those, what the...
I kind of get it, though.
But a midwife, so she's going to get arrested and charged mainly because the former sheriff is kind of leading the headhunt for this one. And she's going to be arrested. She's going to have a trial. A midwife would testify that that baby was super underdeveloped and most likely never had a breath and was actually a stillborn baby rather than a murder trial.
I don't understand if she hid the body, though.
You know what I mean, though. It was stillborn, not a murder. So there's no point in a murder trial because she didn't murder her baby.
I'm kind of iffy on that one because you just did a case of where a lady, there's dead babies because they were trying to conceal the pregnancy.
What?
Your Peter case that you did?
So this is in a different country and a different year.
It doesn't matter. I'm just saying we've done plenty of cases, even more current cases, where women are willing to off their babies and hide their pregnancies.
Well,
so I kind of get the whole concealment and if the baby's dead. But then again, if it was only 17, that had to be super teeny tiny.
Now, several servants would testify that Anne had been having lady issues a few weeks prior to her being found trying to hide a fetus, which seemed to be a little bit more legitimate because she apparently started having those lady issues after she was tasked with the laborious task of turning malt, which I tried to figure out what the fuck that meant. And the only thing I could figure is back then, you know how when everybody kind of made their own wine or beer or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
That I guess that was the household. Because I did manage to find turning malt is even now in that process of you're just turning or like stirring it up, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
But my guess would be they're probably doing it at such a high volume, and however much you have to turn it, you're doing it by hand, so it must be like a teeny tiny shovel. I don't know. But she was doing that task, and it
Labor intensive, yeah.
sure. So I feel like also doing all this hand scrubbing and doing everything else, not a good lot of sleep. It makes sense that if she miscarried.
Yeah.
But no matter those hard facts, Sir Thomas is like, yeah, you're a baby murderer because you tried to hide it, and I don't really care about anything else. So with all the pull that, again, the former sheriff and a super wealthy family has, they're going to distance themselves from their former maid and paint her as a murderer. And I feel like it was also an effort to, the more they talk shit about Anne and distract, they can kind of shield their grandson away from being brought into it.
Yeah.
And Sir Thomas, he wanted her not only prosecuted, but punished to the fullest extent. And the thing that makes it sicker is, since that family had so much, like, power and influence, they most likely could have handled all of this very quietly, rather than it be like this huge dramatic thing.
That's pretty sad.
And even considering that her being a great maid and all of that, they could have been lenient with her. I mean, just, there were other options, but the fact that they decided to make this like a public thing and just really be not nice to Anne and throw her out there and be like, I want her punished to the fullest. Yeah, baby murderer.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. So with that kind of person gunning for you, you can't be surprised that Anne's going to be found guilty of infanticide.
No.
Not only is she going to be found guilty, but she'll be sentenced to hang at Oxford Castle on December 14th, 1650.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Now, Anne was made to climb a ladder set against the gallows beam. The hangman would place the noose around her neck. When she was done saying her prayers, the ladder would be moved, letting her hang by her neck. Anne had requested her friends and any sympathizers pull on her body to expedite her death.
Oh.
And they would do that, which apparently isn't abnormal. I didn't know that was a thing.
It's to snap the neck, yeah.
Well, to kind of make it quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them would even lift her up a bit and yank her down with all their weight on her legs a few times. And I was sitting there. The picture that this whole scene painted for me was wild.
I'm sure.
Because I imagine if you're her friend or family member or anything else, you're probably crying, and they're just like picking her up a little bit and pulling her down, hanging off her legs and all that. And apparently it was a big enough to do that the authorities feared that they were gonna, like, the rope can't support all this weight. So they're like, hey, none of that, back off. A soldier standing by would take pity on Anne, and I guess that nobody could hang on her legs to speed in her strangling. So he'd hit her about 4 to 5 times with the butt of his musket to help finish her off quicker.
Jesus.
He was super helpful. But if you're not feeling bad for Anne at this point, I don't know what else would make you feel bad for this poor woman.
That she's still alive? Could you imagine?
She would swing on the end of the rope for an hour and a half.
Oh my gosh.
Her body just swinging there until...
They're using her as a human piñata.
Well, I don't know how long they let her have people swing on her legs, but
she's like a tire swing and a piñata rolled up into one. Like, well, this is disturbing.
It's not 30 minutes of that. I'm saying they'll finally cut her body down after 30 minutes of her being a pendulum. But the law required people who are executed to go to the anatomy school for dissection. So they would cart her body off to the University of Oxford so that the docs there, William Petty and Thomas Willis, could dissect her for their anatomy class.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. I guess. That's how we can...
Well, the good doctors would crack open her coffin to get started when they heard a weird noise, and I imagine they looked at each other like, they shouldn't be making noises.
Oh my God, she's alive.
And then they find out that noise came from Anne. Not only that, but she's got a bit of a pulse, and she is in fact breathing. Shallow, mind you, but she's fucking breathing.
Oh my gosh.
So they're going to squeal for help, their colleagues Ralph Brathurst and Henry Clerk. all 4 fellas would get to work on trying to bring Anne around.
Why?
I don't know. Probably because they're doctors and they were about to dissect her and experiment on her little body. But now they can see how to resuscitate.
Alright.
They would prop her up and pour hot cordial right down her pipes.
Oh.
Which I laughed at because let's hang her, then drown her.
Well, I was thinking more let's hang her and then let's get her drunk.
So they pour that hot cordial down her throat, and it did make her cough a few times. No surprise there for me.
Nope.
But they would rub her limbs to get her circulation going, because mind you, it's December, so when she's left in the cold, just hanging from the rope for 30 minutes, and then thrown into a coffin, and I can't imagine they were real fast of like, let's run her over here and cut her open. So she was out in chilly weather for a good long while, so I imagine her body is super cold as well. So they're rubbing up on her limbs to get the circulation going, when they're like, you know what, let's do some bloodletting. Because, nothing gets your blood going like a good draining.
It's not funny. This is disturbing.
I feel like this is the equivalent of an elementary schooler having ideas of what'll bring her around. I got it. Let's do this. Well, because then they would be like, you know what? Let's shove this feather down her throat to give it a tickle.
What?
They would even apply a poultice to her breasts.
A what?
So it's like you can make it out of all sorts of stuff.
I'm not gonna.
Sometimes it's like a warming ointment, a concoction of herbs or whatever, and then they'll lay a cloth over it. Some people will make this weird, and I'm not suggesting it, these old timer folks will use like turpentine, kerosene, and lard as a decongestant for your chest. But I don't know what they used on her, but they were rubbing stuff on her tits.
I'm sure they were.
to warm her up under the name of science.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing all this, and then they're like, you know what? Let's administer a tobacco smoke enema.
Oh, they're just playing with her body, okay? Nothing's going to convince me otherwise. That's not, no. If you tell me one of them boinks her because they're going to try to warm the other side too, no.
I can tell you when I was reading this case, I was like, my God.
You're sick.
I think I'd definitely like to get the guillotine.
You're sick because you were all excited to tell me this case. I see why, you dirty ass pervert.
I sure was, because I'd never in my life heard of a tobacco smoke enema. So I had to do some Googling there.
That's called a nicotine problem if I've ever heard one.
But I was just doing the whole, my God.
Did they put a pipe?
Hold on, I'm gonna. That's what I'm gonna explain you to.
Or do somebody like literally sucking off of it and going into her asshole?
Would you pipe down? Because I did the same thing. If I did some blinking of, was somebody just smoking and they just literally blew smoke up her ass? Or like, are we talking, is there a scientific thing up to this? So what they did was...
Did they have tubes?
Shh! My God, woman, I can't answer it. So in order to do enemas, they did have like things to do enemas. It consisted of, they would take a pig's stomach to use as the bladder for the billow. So picture like, those bulb things that they use to suck snots out of little kids' noses. That would be made out of a pig's bladder as the billow. And they would literally like squeeze it to suck the smoke in and then shove that into an ass and then...
You have me in tears at this moment because, dude, I literally just referenced buying one of those bulbs, suction things to use on my 9-year-old because he wouldn't blow his nose and ended up with a double ear infection and in the emergency room with bloody ears. And I was literally just talking to you about those things.
I can tell you, it was real hard not to tell you all of this.
You're sick.
But that ran me down the rabbit hole of...
I bet it did.
There's actual pictures of the devices they used for the... Well, not actual pictures, but drawings, rather, of the setup that they would have, because they did do tobacco smoke enemas. Now, not only that it was actually a thing that medical professionals did, but it was a form of resuscitation, particularly for drowning victims. And I was sitting there doing the whole, how the fuck have I never heard of a tobacco smoke enema as being a form of resuscitation? But apparently the science behind it was tobacco will stimulate, apparently, in the smoke variety going up your ass. They also thought it would heat and warm your bowels and help with like just getting everything back moving, which I was sitting, I like, so much of this is disturbing.
Yeah.
And again, it turned out that people also use tobacco smoke enemas for stimulating respiration, to eliminate headaches, to as a cure for colds, typhoid fever, cholera outbreaks, and even as a treatment for hernias. To which I was sitting there going, "The fuck? They're just shoving shit in people's asses under the name of anything."
It doesn't change just because it's 1600s.
Oh, they did it up to the 19th century. That's why I was like, how has it not been a thing? But if you ask me, it sounds like, just like you said, that it's just a bunch of weirdos getting away with some sick shit in the name of medical assistance.
Well, not to change the subject, because I promise you it's not. You made me
Google it.
remember. I sent you and Dave that Facebook post of boofing, and it's literally, I just texted you a screenshot from when I sent it to you. Of it's got some lady with her knees up by her head and her ass up in the air, and some doctor is like hammering some shit into her ass.
So not only did I just see that, but I totally just sent that to my coworkers.
It was how they inserted medication, and that was in the 1800s, and it was like, I found that alarming, but I'm not surprised that they were doing it in the 1600s.
Yeah.
Apparently everybody thinks that back door is an entrance.
Yeah, but it's just wild.
Disgusting.
But I ended up doing the whole, okay, so I ran down, okay, that was a legitimate thing to, at that point in time, as a way to resuscitate somebody. So I was like, all right. And the whole rubbing that ointment or concoction of herbs on her chest was also a way of a warming thing, and also in the way of helping somebody get resuscitated. Now, once they're done smoking her asshole, they would get the idea that since that wasn't really working, or maybe it wasn't working fast enough, let's tuck in another gal next to her naked body and have her rub up on her body to stimulate heat.
What?
I was thinking of, like, when somebody's like out in the wild and they fall into ice or icy water or whatever, and your body heat will warm them up.
Yeah.
So they decided they'd go that route. And after
They just wanted to watch two naked ladies rubbing up against
that's what
each
I
other.
was like, after like they poked, prodded, shoved things up and at, like, it's just, I don't know.
They put everything in this girl's orifices, and now they're gonna just have somebody else rubbing up on her.
Yeah. And after 12 to 14 hours of their working, Anne would start to come around and start talking. Now, by day 4, she's able to eat solid food, and within a month, she made a full recovery. But weirdly, couldn't recall much of her execution. The last thing she really remembered was the executioner putting a blanket over her head, but she doesn't really remember once the ladder was removed or people hanging off her legs. So I feel like maybe once the rope constricted, maybe it made her go, like, the sleeper hold kind of thing, of like maybe she just conked out, which is great, but it's just like, man, she wouldn't have wanted to know what was going on during all of that.
No, poor thing. Did they turn around and execute her again?
So I feel like since it was December, I think the cold was probably on her side, and also that she was younger, so like she's not as frail as if she were in her 30s or 40s.
What?
For that time period.
Oh, that time period.
For that time period.
Got it. All right.
Because, people keeled over real early on. That's why they married real young, because the lifespan wasn't that great. And also, not being somebody of means, you're not real healthy to begin with, so I would imagine she had her age and that it was cold. Because you know how, like, when people drown and the water's super cold, it kind of slows everything down?
Yeah. Well, and they probably also had the reason the older men married the younger women was because with the rate they like to cut the babies out of women.
Mm-hmm. And apparently blow literal smoke up their ass.
I wonder if that has
I kind of feel like that is where that phrase came from. I didn't run that one down because I was getting wildly distracted for this case.
I'm sure you were.
But I do feel like since it was considered a way to, like, stimulate blowing smoke up somebody's ass, it would be stimulating a response.
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel like that's where that came from. I could be wrong.
You're probably not. I wonder if the hood on her, if that bunched up around her neck,
So that just put pressure but didn't allow the rope to actually constrict.
So I'm going to answer that question for you, because up to this point, apparently hangings weren't very effective, and we're going to get to the why on that in a second. But apparently there were a number of people who, like, when they would go do the hangings, that then they'd end up, oh my God, you're not dead. So they get hung again. Now, mind you, this is a month later, and you've got to, like, they could hang her again. But authorities felt that God had saved her and thus declared her innocent, so the current sheriff gave her a pardon on the basis of divine intervention. And no one objected to that, because good old Sir Thomas, that was gunning for her to be punished to the fullest extent, he actually died 3 days after her hanging. So there's nobody there to be like, kill her again! Now, mind you, there's plenty of people who are going to be talking trash and, like, not like her because she's a loose lady and the problem of the town.
Questionable morals. Yeah.
But nobody, like, with the power and wealth that Sir Thomas had would be pushing for that. And then in the 1650s, I feel like if you think God made a decision, you're not going to fuck with that. So she does get pardoned of that.
She's a lucky girl.
Yeah, I did think it was kind of funny. Sir Thomas died 3 days after she was hanged.
He sounds like he was probably a fat slob.
Yeah. Now, Anne's father, he would come forward, because, mind you, now Anne, even though she's pardoned, she's not going to find work really anywhere, and she can't go back to work for the dead guy. So her dad would be like, you know what? I'm going to charge people to come talk to you, and because you're the woman that was saved by God, and that'll help take care of you. And then also, apparently, you have to pay for your pardon.
Oh.
I'd never heard of that one either. So it also helped pay the sheriff. And I was kind of curious on that one, because I guess I'm curious that, were they did they kind of bribe the sheriff of, like, nobody's really upset and we'll pay this much to get her pardoned, kind of thing? Because it seems like back in those days, everybody was corrupt and disgusting. But so people would pay to talk to Anne, and eventually she'd move out to the country and stay with her friend, and I would imagine also to get away from the people and the nonsense that life was. So she would pack up her coffin and head out.
What?
And she did, in fact, take her coffin with her and kept it in her cottage upstairs.
Yeah, it was paid for once.
Yeah, and I guess she would use it eventually, so it would make sense you're going to save a buck. That, this is mine! But Anne eventually would find herself a fella and get married and crank out 3 kids before keeling over in childbirth at the age of 37.
Oh my gosh.
So relatively, she had a great life after the hanging. And the good doctors would become famous for their medical miracle. It would also appear that the handsy little prick Joffrey lived and died in whatever shadow he crawled into, because you don't hear anything from him. So I don't know what became of him. Apparently nothing. I also figure his family was ashamed of him, even if they shielded him from the public.
Yeah.
He was an outcast after that. But, dude, so many side notes for you, because I didn't want to get so lost and tell you these in the middle, because I feel like this whole case was ping-ponged all over. But so back to the tobacco thing and its endless number of cured ailments nonsense. They would use a tobacco poultice as a pain reliever. They also believed it was a treatment of cancer, again with the headaches, stomach cramps, gout, intestinal worms, and to treat generally female diseases, which made me do a lot of blinking, because the fuck does that mean? And I'm going to take a wild guess that hysteria is probably on the list. But I didn't run down that rabbit hole because, again, this was like an antbed of activity. But I read about one feller whose wife had drowned and a sailor was passing by, and I guess as he's dragging her out of the water or trying to slap her around, and he doesn't know what to do, and the guy's like, hey, stuff this stem of my pipe into her ass, cover the bowl with a piece of paper, and blow real hard.
Oh my God.
They did that, and supposedly the woman came too, but I was doing the whole blinking of, what the fuck? I hope they threw that pipe out.
Are you telling me that those videos that you see on Facebook of like the parents playing dead and the toddler goes over and then is like trying to wake up the parent and then shoves their finger or a broom or whatever in the person's
Pretty
ass
much.
crack and it jumps them up? Those kids are destined to be doctors.
They're old souls.
They sure are. Hey, those doctors really are like toddlers just shoving stuff places.
But it was later thought that since tobacco had stimulating properties, that's why it was helpful. And I'm just going to say, sign me up for the no thank you list. I'll take drowning for one. And like I said, they used that technique up to the 19th century, which is still wild to me.
Yeah.
But with your other side fact rabbit hole thing on the, I told you to get back to the whole hanging process. It shouldn't be a shock to you that executions can be botched because even nowadays, lethal injection can fail and such.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, when hanging started, the person would be strung up on a tree or a beam or something and be standing there on a cart or something, and the ladder or the horse or whatever they're on would be removed from underneath them, and they would just dangle there until they were strangled to death.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, you feel like you've seen enough of the shows where somebody's on a cart and they move the cart.
They slap that horse on the ass and it goes, and then it goes.
Yes. But anyway, a lot of the times they would pull the rope super tight, and then when the cart or the horse or whatever was removed from underneath them, they didn't drop too much, which is why it's referred to as a short drop hanging. Now, during this type of hanging, it didn't exert a whole lot of force to cause damage to your neck. So the life is just kind of squeezed out of you over time through the rope getting tighter and gravity pulling you down and putting pressure on your carotid arteries, your jugular vein, and of course, your windpipe. Now, since it's a slow buildup of pressure, people didn't die instantly. Their breathing would slow and usually they'd become unconscious, but it wasn't abnormal for the person to be struggling for a few minutes until they went limp. Usually, that's when people would take them down. Now, in some cases, like with Anne, it would just render them unconscious, and then when they're taken down, they're not dead, they're just unconscious.
Right, and then once they relieve the rope or undo the rope,
yeah, they'll come around eventually.
Yeah.
So by 1760, they start just leaving people hanging up there to be sure that they're dead because I guess they got tired of taking prisoners down and like, this fucker's not dead. We didn't leave him up there long enough. So then that makes me think all those movies where people come into towns and people are still just clearly dead but hanging there. So that's why that was a thing.
They were just making sure.
Yeah, I thought it was more of a display of this will happen to you if you did whatever they did. But it could also have been it did both.
Yeah.
But you also have to take into consideration that the stethoscope wasn't invented until the 1800s. So they were really just shoving their ear to the person's chest to hear if they're dead. And you figure if they're hanging up there long enough, their heartbeat can be slow enough that it's not exactly a quiet area. They're just, I guess they're dead. So that's that whole thing. Now, typically, if somebody was taken down and realized they weren't dead, they generally just strung them back up and redid it, which must have sucked. There were also the times that the volunteers pulling the rope, that would break and they'd fall and like break a leg or something and then get hung again. And I'm like, oh my God, this is absolutely horrific. I don't want to be saved. I don't want to be hanged for anything. Like, it turns out you can't even have a stillborn baby without being lynched.
So this case is funny because not to take it off of this Mary lady,
Anne.
Anne. There's a
same number of letters.
No. You laugh. Wait, I gotta find it. There's a lady, Margaret Dixon, and she's in my list of cases to do. Literally, almost mirrors your case.
I think I almost did that one.
But she was 1724. She was 22. She gave birth to a stillborn baby. She was also single. So she was accused of killing the baby. She was hung and survived the noose.
Well, when I was doing this one, I found a whole huge list of people who were executed a second time because the first one didn't take, but the number of botched hangings was so crazy. No wonder the French went with just chop off their head. That's guaranteed.
Yeah.
They didn't botch that unless the blade missed, I guess. But I can't imagine anything more horrific than having to be hanged twice. And I thought initially being being hung to death was bad, but it's so much more horrific if you have to endure all of that and then go through for round 2. But
Yeah.
it wasn't until 1760 when the new drop gallows were put into practice, and it's exactly what you're thinking of like the whole platform and the floor comes out from underneath them kind of thing, and there's a huge drop that's usually like 12 to 18 inches. Now, some prisoners would go limp immediately and didn't appear to suffer at all, because sometimes it would just snap their neck, and that was way quicker. And it really caught on.
They were the lucky ones.
Well,
They were the actually guilty ones.
yeah. Now, it caught on pretty quickly and would replace the whole ladder and cart practices, since it seemed to be quicker and did a better job. They didn't have to do very many redos if it just snapped their neck. Now, mind you, even with the drop method, sometimes it still had the results of somebody strangling there for a little bit instead of it snapping their neck. So it wasn't completely without their whoopsies.
I wonder if the hood really played a factor into whether or not.
So I initially was thinking that. And then when I saw how many people who, it seemed more like because the rope was already pulled tight and then they're not really falling. So if it's up too high, it's not even really crushing their windpipe because of the placement of the rope. And then if they go unconscious because of
Lack of oxygen. Yeah.
well, if they go unconscious during that whole process, they're not going to be squirming. So it's really, I mean, their body's just on survival mode at that point, I guess, for lack of better words. But it's crazy to me that was even a thing.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Although this whole case was crazy to me, because every time it developed into something else, I was like, my God, this was already bad at this poor woman being subjected to some pervy grandson of her employee and then being hung out to dry when she
Literally
has like this horrible experience of she didn't know she was pregnant and she doesn't know what to do or where to go. And then before that, she's going on trial for murder and just fuck. But
it sucked to be a woman back in the day.
it sure did. And then again with the whole she's lucky she didn't die from pneumonia from cordial being poured down her gourd. But then the feather tickling trick, I was like, okay, nowhere else did I read that they stuffed a feather down people's throats. So I still have to lean on these fellers were just trying anything. And I feel like since bodies of executed prisoners went to the anatomy school, I feel like that was so they could play around with their tricks. So I think they were super excited at the idea of trying out any new ideas of resuscitating people.
It's really disgusting.
It's really disgusting because I don't understand.
Let me put this in my pipe and smoke it.
I don't understand the leap between she's not breathing out of her mouth hole. Let's give her ass to mouth. Blow real hard. It'll stimulate her. She sure isn't faking it. She'll start talking now.
Wow.
But that's when I told you when I was working on this case and I actually laughed out loud. And I was like, this does not sound real. What the fuck is wrong with these people?
A lot. You're sick. Because as you were telling me this case, it was pretty horrifying. And then...
Oh, open up the pictures.
Oh, God.
Well, the drawings. They're not actual pictures.
Mm-hmm. What are they poking her with? Oh, that's the gun where he's whacking her.
What?
With the butt of the gun.
Oh, the first picture? Oh, yeah. Their caricatures weren't the best, Andrea.
Well, the sword he has, it made it just look like it looked like it was all connected.
Yeah, no, that was when he was hitting her. And then they got the little person holding her feet. Because, mind you, her being saved by God was the talk of the town afterwards. They even have that coffin in the picture. I'm surprised she didn't try to sell that. Some weirdo with a collection.
Okay. Cone for rectal insertion. Ugh.
You gotta say what you're looking at. You can't just say some weird shit.
It's your pictures.
I know.
Mouthpiece to which the pipe is attached.
So she's now looking at the picture of the smoke enema billow pump thingy majig, and it lists all the parts. And because it's a simpler, more portable device.
It's got A is a pig's bladder, which, ew.
Somehow we just skipped B and B.
We went to FG, which is the smoking pipe, which connects to, it looks like, E, which is the tap, but D is the mouthpiece to which the pipe is attached, which I don't understand how the tap is on the other side of the mouthpiece, but I'm not putting my mouth anywhere near that thing, especially because it looks like the other end, which is where the cone for the rectal insertion goes.
Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay.
And the next
Oh.
picture is the anatomy school.
What the hell is with her pubes? She's got a full bush, and it looks like a teeny peeny coming out of there.
So at first, I'm not sure.
And what's with her saggy tits under her armpits?
So just so we're clear, I wasn't sure if this picture was more of to show an anatomy class, so I don't think that was her. I think that was just them cutting open
Well, it's still not flattering. This lady's got boobs under her arm. They're under her biceps.
I assumed it was probably a dude. That's why it's clearly got a penis.
Well, then why's he got tits under his armpits?
I assumed he was probably older, and that's more he was ribby. Look, these pictures are not high quality. Do you see the picture on the wall? It looks like it should be a Picasso. I don't even know what's with all the things on his face.
I thought that's a supervisor person because they got a book in front of them. They're instructing.
Oh, yeah, maybe. But he seriously has some sort of acne scars or something.
Those are his cheekbones.
He needs to eat more.
It's dire times, Claire. Dire times. News. Oh, yeah. I like
that. So that was like the cover of their whole. They wrote the whole. Because again, there wasn't a whole lot of entertainment, so it was the amazing Anne Greene story.
You should include the boofing screenshot. You should.
So, well, before we get sidetracked, because I had to tell you.
Wow, Claire.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that.
I knew you'd enjoy it.
Yeah, you're sick.
That's why I told you going from to try to find another case. This one was wild.
Yeah.
And also another side note with the tobacco. They did have where they did it too much and then with basically overdose people and they get real extra sick.
Did you ever smoke a cigarette? Oh, you did, because I gave you one when I briefly smoked.
You hear that, Ma?
She don't listen to us, and if she does, she stopped a long time ago. But so the nicotine, when you first smoke, if you actually inhale it, it gives you a headache or a little bit of a high. Makes you feel kind of sick too. So,
So I thought they add more to it. I know it's got.
Well, I don't think that they really even have to add to it. The cigarettes nowadays are filtered.
I don't know. I don't know anything about that. Nicotine is not added to tobacco, but rather extracted from the tobacco plant.
I don't know.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mindfucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.